Good evening, New York City and my listeners around the world. This is your host, Elizabeth Tripp. We're live here in New York City. It's Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm so excited to be here. If you're tuning in live, then you're on my live YouTube channel, bit.ly/Luminous Life Podcast. And if you ever miss the podcast, if you happen to not be able to tune into the live broadcast, you can always download an episode on any major podcasting platform. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Podbean. It's available every week, a new episode. So welcome to the show. Again, my favorite night of the week. We get to come out and share a powerful message. You know, Luminous Life Podcast is about bridging our human experiences, taking our challenges and trials and trepidations, and really allowing for us to see the deeper meaning, the real soul lessons in them. And along the way, allowing ourselves, as we look at these experiences and we see the deeper meaning within them, to uncover a light within us that has always been there, a bright, beautiful, shining, luminous light, and allow for that light to then begin to shine outwards and really shape and start to create a reality of such joy and freedom and ease, rather than one where we are chained to our suffering or really tied to our pains and living in them. So that's what Luminous Life is all about. And it's an opportunity for me to also bring on these game-changing guests. You know, I have my solo shows and you guys get to come along with me and hear my personal journeys, but I also love to bring on guests that are doing incredible things, who are really becoming game-changing individuals who have harnessed a power within them and the ability to look at life in a completely different way and now start to impact the world in a big way. So I love these kind of guests. We actually have one tonight coming on. I'm so excited to introduce her. But before we get to the guest, I want to, a couple things. Honor today. Today is September 11th. It is a very solemn day in New York City. Even so many years later, there's so many lives that had been touched and continue to be touched by the tragedies of September 11th. And so I wanted to be sure that I honored that day and observed and had a moment of reflection of that event. And in thinking about that and meditating on September 11th and what I wanted to really bring to the show, it was really important that I touched on a perspective of looking at it that often isn't really talked about or heard on these types of days and within these tragic events. But our wounds that we experience, our challenges that we have, our obstacles, the traumas, big or small, that we go through, there's wisdom within them. There is something potentially that we can gain from these experiences if we allow our mind, if we just allow our heart to open up to the possibility that things in our life happen for a reason, and that at the time we can't quite grasp or understand it, but that there is something that is being moved moved deep within us. There is an opportunity for us to see something, to be able to learn and grow and expand from, even in the most trying situations. And nothing can compare to losing thousands and thousands of people on this day. But when we look at it, the lives that were transformed as a result, and perhaps the wisdom that was gained from this experience, the way that we look at life, the way that things operate, the way that we communicate with our families and friends and globally across the world, and the way that we value things differently. There was a wisdom that came from this. There was something that each of us got from this experience. So I offer that, I know, on this day for many of us in observance and remembrance, to just perhaps open our ears and hearts to this deeper, more spiritual message, and see that anywhere in our life, even if it wasn't 9/11 that hit you in a big way, but any tragedy, any wound, could we possibly come out from the suffering kind of conversation and into what it could offer us in a way to transform from pain to purpose, or from hurt to really a new way of understanding ourselves and others. So let's all take a nice big deep breath, and as we begin the show, letting the day go, letting the experiences that we took on throughout the day and the people that we came across and the messages we heard throughout the TV and on the news about the 9/11 observance, and just let that go. And just open our minds, open our hearts, open our ears up to why you've been guided to this show this evening, why you're here. It's by no coincidence. Something greater than yourself has brought you here. And in fact, something greater than ourselves has brought our guest here tonight. And she has a really, really awesome message to share. And so I want to formally introduce my guest by giving you guys a little background about her. So this guest I've known for quite some time. I think it's going on 4 years now, but I have L.F. Turner. She's a creative architect, crafting shows that illuminate and explore the most vulnerable parts of life, which are the parts where we are most human. And through the journey of her characters, the audience explores those places within themselves. They see themselves in a new light, and they leave each show transformed. And get this, by the way, she lives, works, and meditates in New York City. So, welcome, LF. How are you?
I'm doing well, Elizabeth. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you here this evening.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to bring the guests to your message, really have you share them more about what you do. Mm-hmm. And, there was this word that I used in the beginning to introduce you. You call yourself a creative architect.
I do.
Can you share with us, what does that mean? I've actually never heard that word before.
I think the reason you've never heard that word before is because I might be the only person who calls myself that. It was my own creation. So yes, I call myself a creative architect, as you know, because we have known each other and worked together for about 4 years now.
Yeah.
That I used to think of myself as a writer, which I think is a very, a word a lot of people recognize.
Yeah.
And the further I got into what I do, what I actually do, I realized that writing is sort of a smaller word than the kind of stories that I tell and the aim that I have when I bring a story to an audience. Yeah, it's creative architect, I think, to me implies a greater sense of inclusion. That the way that I craft stories is from taking my own experiences which I've had quite a few in my years, taking my own experiences and really understanding how I changed and how I processed them, and it helps me see myself and the people that I live with and love in a very different light. And it taps into a much more universal feeling that a lot of people can identify with. And so a creative architect is someone who crafts a story, characters, and also settings and themes and physical realities that allow an audience to really experience the story as their own.
Wow.
I know.
That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
So tell us just a little bit about the kinds of works that you have been creating. So the things that you have done. So what is like one of the most fascinating shows that you've been coming up with or have come up with? What's on the table? What's cooking?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
I have a couple. I have one in particular that I think ties nicely into what you were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah.
About how transformative grief can be.
Yeah.
Which is a two-act play centered in a family that experiences a really severe loss. 3 adult sisters, the middle sister passes away.
Yeah.
And it's about how the family deals with that loss and the kind of things that it brings to the surface in the first act.
Yeah.
The second act is 10 years later, and they find themselves going through the experience again.
Yeah.
But in a different way, and in some ways it's better. For some characters who have made the choice to let that grief change them, they find themselves in a much lighter and more loving position. And in the characters who have decided to let the grief define them, they find themselves sort of closed and separated and much smaller in their lives.
Beautiful parallel there.
It works.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting contrast.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that I tap into that, and part of the reason that I write about that is because I experienced that in my own right.
I was going to say, you mentioned that you use your own personal experiences because you know that they're so powerful. And, and you know, for those of you who have tuning in, me and Lindsay have worked together. I'm her personal life activator. And,
yes, you are.
And through that work, you know, like you shared, you've been able to transform your perspective of some of these really, you know, wounds we could call, right? Or spaces where there was more darkness in your life, where your light wasn't ignited and shining as brightly as it is today.
Yeah.
So, share with us this impact that your experience must have had to write a story about grief and transformation. I mean, that's incredible. People don't want to touch that usually.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I think initially, before we started working together, I didn't want to touch that either.
Yeah, right?
I think a lot of people who experience grief, you know, shy away from it because it feels so heavy and it feels so dark.
Right.
I couldn't tell you how long ago it was because I'm not the best with the concept of time.
Right.
But we lost my grandfather to COPD, which is emphysema, essentially. He passed at home, which was his wish, and he wanted us to be there, me and my mother and my father.
Yeah.
And we drove from New York to Ohio, and we lived in the house with him for, I'm going to say it was about 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It was a long time while he left.
Well, 2 weeks is a short time, it feels like.
Well, it is, yes. It is simultaneously very short and very long.
And long, I imagine, in a new house and you didn't know where you were and this and that. Yeah.
And that kind of illness, because he was in a hospital bed in
right.
the front room, and we sort of took every day as it came, so it seemed like a very long time.
Yeah.
Even though you're right, 2 weeks is nothing in the grand scheme of things.
But how old were you back then?
Oh, I was probably in my early 30s.
Ah, got it.
I was probably in my early 30s.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting time because stress has a tendency to bring things out in people. You know, it brought things out in me.
Yeah.
You know, I dealt with it in the only way that I knew how,
right.
from having been exposed to stress and difficulty earlier in my life.
Yeah.
And so part of my way to deal with it was to essentially play a very supportive role to everyone else in the house.
Ah.
You know, I cooked for everyone in the house, and I stayed up late with everyone who was grieving, and I grieved with them, which I think is very normal.
You got busy.
I got very busy.
And would you say, like, in younger years, that was a way that you would cope with,
Absolutely.
stress and pressure of whatever you were going through, a challenge or an obstacle?
If I was not doing something that felt like forward motion, it was utterly terrifying.
So who can identify with that, right? I'm like, that's everybody's dealing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there were one of two ways that I would deal with stress. I would either get very, very busy so that I was not paying attention to it at all.
Right.
Or I would withdraw completely and sort of stay in a very quiet, isolated space.
Yeah.
Which is two very different ways of dealing with it, but things that I could easily do.
And with the same result, which was, did you really process then what was going on?
Not at all. I mean, grief at loss, I think, is its own weight. Because what used to be there and what used to seem so permanent suddenly goes away. And
there's a lot of fear there.
There is a lot of fear there. And if you have loved ones in your life who are going through it with you, you experience it and they experience it also. So there's a lot of dynamics that come into play. And people around you can become very different, right? Because they're coping with it in a way that they can identify with.
Right. They all get triggered to go back to some early on childhood mechanism or coping skill that helped them back then when they wanted safety or needed to feel secure, right?
Absolutely.
So even as adults, we're all going into our own sort of childlike ways of making ourselves feel better.
Right.
So you were out in Ohio, you and Mom and you and your dad, and you guys are taking care of Grandpa, and you're taking on everything, Lindsay.
Yeah, as much as I can handle.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been crazy time for you.
It's a time I don't remember very well because I was working so hard to not be in it. I remember very little about it. Some things stick out. Some strange things stick out, like making chili in the middle of it all. Yeah. For no other reason than, hey, I can make chili. I have all the ingredients.
Right.
Some things stick out, like sitting next to my grandfather in his hospital bed with late at night when there's no one else around.
Right.
And reading to him, feeling close to him and also really dreading what I knew was coming, which was the end for him.
Right.
Some other things stick out, some words that were exchanged in my other family members, like my aunts, who were dealing with it in their own way.
Must have been a big wound.
It was a very large wound. He was, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that he was beloved in our family. Yeah. And to be there for that was a very big loss. Yeah. And we went through it the only way that we knew how. Right.
And you talk about something interesting that I think is worth touching on, especially for a day like 9/11, is I don't remember. My brain kind of blacked out, or I kind of went on autopilot, or I felt a lot of times I hear in my practice, it was an out-of-body experience. Yeah. And when you hear me say that and you know where you are today and understanding it, what do you think was really going on for you on a deeper level? What do you think was happening for you? Do you think the pain was just so overwhelming that you didn't want to feel it or face it?
I think looking back on it from where I am now, I look back on that moment and I understand how big of a change it was. And how frightening it was. And I think that going through something that is that deep a change, that I shied away from it.
Of course. And what do you think that reason was? Just because it was so scary, or it was just so like...
I think it was overwhelming. I think it was frightening. I think it was sad. I think it felt too big.
Yeah, it felt really big, I imagine.
It did. It felt very big. It felt like standing in a doorway with a great deal of wind blowing, almost too much to stay on my feet.
So Grandpa then passed, right? And you guys went through the motions of everything and burying him. But did you feel like you actually processed that whole time and let it out, or did you carry that, with you for a long time?
Well, we were in an interesting position at the time because he passed, we buried him. I went through stages of understanding what had happened and grieving it and then being okay with it. I think that I carried the weight of the loss for a long period of time, and then I think afterwards I carried what I began to think of as a scar. Yes. Which I think is pretty normal.
A lot of people carry scars, right? And we can think of them as sometimes, like a cloak over you, right? Keeps a little dark place in you. So, right, that we can't quite illuminate or ignite our light with that scar necessarily there. But so how did you open it up? Like, how did you heal it? How did you make that scar soften in a way so that it wasn't so deep or dark for you?
The place that I came to after you and I had talked at great length about forgiveness and peace and acceptance. And you and I talked initially about trusting ourselves. We talked initially about my intuition and my safety and my sense of safety in myself. And that, I think, was really powerful for me because the place that I came to was understanding that we had experienced this as a family. Right. And I remember very distinctly that a very close family friend said, "This will change you if you let it." Yes. Very powerful thing to hear. And many years later, you and I were talking, and in coming to a place where I felt like I could trust myself, and I felt like I could be safe in myself. Then I began to look at experiences that I'd had. And I began to see them in a different light. I began to see them as something that happened. Wow. The difference being it happened. Right. It's not so much that it happened to me. Yes. It happened in my life.
Right. And for a reason?
And for a reason.
Wow.
I mean, ultimately, I came to a place where I understood this had happened in my life. I understood how I had reacted. Right. I understood how my family had reacted. Right. And my extended family had reacted. Right. And I came to a place where I could observe it.
Right. Instead of wearing it.
Instead of wearing it.
Interesting, because a lot of people wear their wounds. And they don't know it, right? They'll be very scared to do things, or they'll not want to open up, or they'll not want to meet different people, or go out on limbs, or lots of different things can happen, right? Or someone divorces, they never want to get married ever again.
Sure.
Right?
Which is, it happens.
Right.
I mean, because that change is so large. Because that grief is so profound. Because that hurts so badly. It's a place you don't want to return to. Right. And in the thing that happened, right, is not wanting to return to that place in myself that felt that loss. I actually let it make a home in me.
Oh, beautiful way of putting that. That's so poetic. And that's why I know you're just like, killing it as a writer.
I was going to say, that would be why I write things down.
That's, you got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, I had let it make a home in me, and in being able to step back from it and revisit it and understand that happens. Loss happens, change happens, grief happens. And to feel that and to let it go and understand happened and happened to me, two very different things.
Yes, you didn't let it define you for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it let me write about it.
Wow.
And this show that I am crafting, people read this show, very select few people, as we find a home for it.
Yes.
Very, very big home coming down the road, which is very exciting.
Which I've had privy to read it.
That's true.
Just hits you home, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It is a gut punch.
Yeah.
And the reason that I am a creative architect and I do what I do for a living is because I have come to a place where I can look back at things that happened and hear them in a very clear, very heartfelt, very soulful way.
Yeah.
And I can put them on paper in that way.
Yeah.
Because what I used to carry around, I put down.
Right. Wow. It sounds like a wound that you experienced, a challenge, a trauma, a loss there, actually helped you find your purpose.
It did.
That's incredible.
It is.
I mean, not many people walk around thinking that out of something that has happened to them so tragically or so awful, right, could be a path or a gateway to something really incredible or beautiful. Even though we hear like these really, famous or talented people who will always share their story, we think, oh, right, but it just happens to them, right? But you're saying, no, all I needed to do was just open up and take a look at the scar and pull back the Band-Aid a little bit and actually see that it could heal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's the same way that you heal any wound, you expose it to light and air.
Yeah.
That's the nature of healing.
Wow.
Yeah. I always go back to that woman, her name was Mary, who, after my grandfather passed, who said so earnestly, "This will change you if you let it." And it took me a while to let it. And so in the second act of this particular show, the same family revisits similar circumstances.
So you crafted the show quite similar to what this is.
Well, and I crafted it that way because we had our own similar experience as a family. About 2 years later, we experienced the loss of my grandmother. So we did get a chance to live through the same circumstances in a very different way.
Right.
And again, having that experience and being able to expose it to light and air and being able to bring it up and look at it and understand it and separate it from myself to know that I am not defined by it allows me to write about it on a much deeper level.
Because what then do you do when you're making that character? You must have them embody some of these pains and thoughts and feelings, right?
Sure.
Because like you say, that like these are the spaces where we're the most vulnerable, right? So that's incredible.
Thank you.
I mean, it just brings such a different element to the kind of work that you're bringing to the table.
It really does. I mean, it's revolutionized the way that I work.
Yeah.
I think that there's a maxim in writing, and I'm not sure if it was something my father made up, because my father's also a writer, or if it's something that is actually written down. But he always told me that characters are made of 3 things. They're made of what they say about themselves, what they say about other people, and what they do. Right? Which is a very technical way to build a character.
Right.
Right? You sit down and you think to yourself, like, all right, I'm going to build a character who says this and does that, and this is what she says about other people around her.
Yeah.
And it sounds very simple and very technical. And what happened to me as I've grown in my scope is that I begin to build characters based on where I know they've been and what I know they've experienced and what they're hanging on to.
Wow.
It's a subtle difference because essentially I still build characters the exact same way.
Right.
What they say about themselves, what they do, what they say about other people.
But ultimately, your personal transformation, your own evolution, and being able to look at your experiences from a new lens or a new perspective has allowed for you to build characters from a different place, yet make them more human and relatable to the audience. So then the audience ends up like going on the ride.
Right. Deeply identify with them.
Wow. Yeah. That is incredible.
It's really quite something.
I am just like, I'm so excited for you for you to bring this kind of transformational work out there. And to have that perspective, if you were really to kind of compare yourself from the writer and the perspective that you had like 10 years ago to now, what would you say were the biggest differences in the way that you see yourself 10 years ago to who you are today?
Well, I mean, how big is the difference between night and day?
Seriously?
How big is that gap?
I love it.
It is very much night and day.
Yeah.
part of the thing about being a creative architect
Yeah.
or a writer or anything that is involved in the creative pursuits, you
Yeah.
put yourself or your work out for public consumption,
Right.
right? And public consumption in terms of like, somebody buys it in order to produce it,
Right.
and then also, audience members come
Yeah.
and see it, and everyone has feelings about
Yeah.
what you've done.
Yeah.
10 years ago, it might actually have been literally 10 years ago, I sold a pilot to a major network.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. And it was...
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's interesting. I
Well,
don't think
you
we've
might have
ever
told
actually
me
talked
that,
about
but
that.
yeah.
No, I actually did that. I was in my late 20s at the time, I believe, and I sold a pilot to a major network.
Wow.
And at the time, I didn't tell anyone I was going to Los Angeles.
Oh.
I was terrified the entire time. My heart was in my throat. I was mortified to talk about it.
Wow.
And I was terrified that no one would like it.
Oh, wow.
And it was really seriously scary.
We call that Little Lindsay, right?
We do. We do. It was like taking a 6-year-old and putting her in a room full of television executives going, go ahead, you know how to do this.
Oh, my gosh.
It was Little Lindsay.
Wow.
Yeah. And now I happen to have done the same thing.
I know a little birdie told me that you just sold a TV show to a major network.
I did. Well, to a major production company.
Whoa!
So we're in our first stages. We don't quite have a network on board yet, but we're gonna.
That is amazing.
Yeah, they're coming. And it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
I sat in a room with these, executives and talked with great ease and great confidence about this piece that I had built. And I knew that I could because it's very personal to me, and I've drawn it up based on my own experiences, based on my own journey in finding out my own beauty, basically.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing is that it sounds to me that as you've gotten clear with the hurts and the pains that you once carried, you've able to free yourself from them and then be able to understand where others are at and create story to be able to shift or transform where they are within these pains or hurts. And that's an incredible thing to do. And like many people, we go through lots of different conversations with ourselves. Am I beautiful? Am I enough? Am I too tall? Am I, a confidence or conversation or power? So those are the kinds of things that you bring to audiences, correct? Like game changing those kinds of conversations that they're having with themselves.
Yeah. Well, I remember, I'm structuring this show. I'm creatively architecturing, if you will.
Yeah.
This show that's centered around 5 women. And in conversation with a really close friend last week, I think, who happens to be a straight guy, I was talking to him about this sense of a lot of what these women share is they think they're doing it wrong. As in their lives, in their endeavors, in their relationships, they are worried that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And he stopped and shared with me that he had also felt that way.
So it crosses across all genders.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's a very universal human feeling.
Yeah.
And I've been there, you've been there, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And to be able to write about it from a place that is deeply personal.
Right.
And to write about it with a great deal of clarity because I don't feel that way anymore.
So you can write about the deeper understanding of beauty because how do you feel about yourself today?
Well, I feel like I'm beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. Without, pride, without worry.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. And to be able to experience that with a level of certainty that I've never known before.
Yeah.
I feel like I can write about it with a great deal of clarity.
Right. Wow.
And it turns out it even reaches, straight men.
There's the wisdom.
Yeah.
there's that wisdom that comes out of the wounds, right? Because like you said, you share from your own experience. So within this program, within this series, this television show, we will get a glimpse into some of those own personal struggles you had that you're free from today. And I love how you bring that into tying it into everybody, because who out there hasn't felt self-conscious or, you know, that they had to try super hard. And so you're reaching these really, you know, incredible concepts that we have socially and culturally that, you know, everyone's sort of going along on the mainstream and you're like, wait a second, I'm going to just shake it up a little bit and get us talking about a different way to look at stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting time to do it as well. I mean, given the cultural shift and the social shift and that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're in a place that is very different.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversations that are happening that have never happened before.
Right.
And I find that really exciting.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the opportunity to be a part of that. And to do it from a place of real knowing.
Wow, that
having
takes
been in that journey.
That takes a powerful person. It does.
Yeah.
How do you ground yourself every day? Like, how do you keep yourself sane?
Well, so you read in the intro that I meditate in New York City. Very true. I do. I have gotten a practice of, you know, spending the morning in meditation just to live in the space that I'm in.
Yeah.
And that space being, you know, my own personal body.
Right.
Which is such a great thing for me to connect to.
Right.
I love to be outdoors.
Yeah.
I love to walk. I love my friends.
Yeah.
You know, I think that part of the way that I have begun to craft my life in sort of this new space that I'm in is to really appreciate how the way I treat myself and the people that I have around me are an integral part of the way that I'm grounded. Yeah. And the way that I replenish myself and the way that I am with myself in a peaceful way.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that. And how well spoken. And you know, you don't even have to use the word spiritual or spirituality when you describe it that way, because the way that you're talking is just so open and fluid and flowing, and there's just a sense of knowing and trust, and you know, you understand your inward self is reflecting out to you, and you're able to look at the world in a really unique, very different way, and that is just so needed and so game-changing for these times, you know? And I feel like, Lindsay, you're on the cusp of doing something really incredible. And I want to just hear like your couple year goal. So just to kind of play with the audience here, because they're all at the edge of the seat. So you have a play that you're going to be coming out with, right? With surrounding the transforming through grief, right? And then you have a TV show that's been picked up by a production company. So we're just going to wait and see where that goes. But so you have a TV show coming and the play, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
It's very exciting.
And so what's the next couple years down the line? What do you want to accomplish here? Or are you just like loving what you're doing right now?
Well, I always have thoughts in my head. Yeah. You know, that is my nature, is just to keep projects in my head because they show up they show up with regularity. Yeah.
They just drop in your mind?
They do. Well, they do. It happens when I least expect it. You know, it's part of, again, the meditation walking friends thing. Yeah. It really helps my brain open up so that I can understand what I'm thinking. Yeah. There's an idea percolating in my head that has been there actually for the better part of about 6 months. Yeah. It's living on paper at the moment and waiting to grow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So there's that. I think that is a big deal.
Nice.
I'm not sure if it's, you know, meant for theater or television, but something in those, along those lines. Yeah. And also, I'm actually moving house in a couple of months.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, into a bigger place, which is really exciting. So there's growth that comes with that I'm very excited about.
And as a creative architect, you can write, you can produce, you can edit. Like, what does that encompass? Everything? Like, you could, so you just do, you're a jack of all trades. You could go behind the camera, in front of the camera. You could write a book. You could produce a play. Everything.
Yes.
That is so cool. And just really quickly here, I wanted to touch base on just you're doing a program with me.
I am.
And it's called Living Life by Design. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to just share with the audience, because I talk about it sometimes on the show. Mm-hmm. What do you think has been valuable about this in just the conversation that we've had today? What has Living Life by Design offered you in terms of looking at wounds and wisdom, and then crafting into these new areas and launching into these bigger spaces? So what has it offered you that you really think has been spectacular?
Well, okay, before I fully answer the question, I will tell you that, again, I was having lunch with a friend of mine who told me that just in the last couple of years that it seems like I've circled the globe a few times.
Oh, no.
I didn't get a chance to tell you that before, but that was a thing. And I know. That was a thing.
I love it.
It was a great description for how I feel.
Yeah.
I think the most valuable thing that has come out of doing this particular program is being able to slowly and deeply engage with myself. I feel like we talk about grief, we talk about wounds, those things, when those things come, you can begin to pick a behavior that helps you cope. Yeah. And that behavior comes reference. Mm-hmm. It becomes a reference.
Habit.
So it's something that becomes habit.
Yeah.
And underneath it, underneath a lot of old habits for me, is the person that I actually am.
Who you've always been.
Who I've always been.
Yeah.
And so what we've done, I feel like, is to peel back the cloaks or the layers, or however you'd like to put it, to who I've always been, who I actually am. Yeah. So when I wake up in the morning and sit in my peace of mind, it's true peace of mind because I feel like I'm actually myself.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That means so much. I love that.
It comes with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
And that is truly valuable.
Wow, that's powerful, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind, beautiful, poetic words to describe it.
It's my pleasure.
And it's a program that was really designed with you in mind. I mean, really, it's a great way to see you transform, and I love it. And I love how you're aiming high. You're reaching for the bigger and really impactful ways to reach a global community. Absolutely love that about you. So how do people stay in touch with you? Are you on social media? Do you have a website?
I do have a website. It's lftwords.com.
Okay, so lftwords.com. Got it.
And I also have an Instagram handle, which is @funcannon, FONCANNON.
Okay.
101.
Okay, so we'll go get that up on the YouTube, and we'll put it up there.
Yes, it's quite the mouthful.
Okay,
so yes,
I was like,
you.
I'm not sure I'm going to repeat all of that.
That would be the F in LF. That's why that's there.
Yeah.
But that's a great way to stay in touch with me. And
cool.
You can also email me through the website. That happens.
Okay, perfect. Because I bet everyone's wondering when they can go to your show.
I do my best to keep my website
and what
updated,
channel we're going to be watching the series on.
Don't know yet.
Yeah, so
when I know, they'll all know.
Excellent. So that's wonderful, and I want to thank you so much for sharing this today. It's just so special for us to tie in, the symbolism of today being September 11th, and for us really diving into those wounds that you were talking about with death and grievance, and seeing how it's really created purpose and transformation and light, and really igniting this bright luminous life within you. And really now you going on this incredible journey, feeling so powerful, feeling so confident, so beautiful, and changing, really transforming the mindset of people around the world. I couldn't think of a more incredible thing to do. So I find you amazing.
Thank you.
And I would love to have you back on the podcast, you know.
Sure.
I'd love that.
Sure.
And thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So guys, this is Elizabeth Tripp. We're going to be signing out. If something has moved you today and you really want to get to the bottom of it, maybe you've experienced a death, a trauma, an obstacle, and you're ready to, like Lindsay, peel back the layers of the darkness or the cloak that you feel you might be wearing. You feel tired and pain, trapped in life in some way. I want you to visit my website. It's nourishthesoul.nyc.com, and let's get started today. Free conversation to just get the ball rolling, understanding what you're going through. I know I can help you. So this is Elizabeth Tripp. We are signing out. Love and light.